Do you question everything? Hi, it's Peter Merrick, and over the last 2 years, since March 2020, I started questioning everything, not accepting anything. It's been liberating because now I have a reason to know because it impacts me directly. See, I asked myself why I believed what I believed, and I came up with 5 reasons why I accepted the reality that was presented to me. One, people in authority who didn't know better told me this is the way the world worked, and why would I question them? I loved them, and they were here before me. And I discovered none of them questioned either. Number two, when I was in my 20s, I became very, very focused on my career. I was just too busy. I was also too lazy. Why rock the boat when things are going well? I was into accumulation, which was building my ego with things and titles. I was either too stupid as well, asking those questions. That required a lot of gray matter. Why not just accept what I'd been told? You know, a question is infinitely more powerful than its answer because you are framing a question and that's causing your query, your search, and you're going to find things that you didn't know, things that could be paradigm shifting, breaking. They'll create a paradox in your thinking. And lastly, the one I believe prevents most of us is God forbid we come up to answers that do not fit the mainstream narrative. What's acceptable, how good boys and girls are supposed to behave. One of the things that has gotten my attention, something I never paid much attention to, was how money is created. Fiat cash. Do you know the Federal Reserve is a private institution? We're going to be talking about the history in just a second, but I just want to explain what fractional banking is. It allows financial institutions to create money out of nothing. But with that money, you can actually buy real assets, things that are tangible. So zeros and ones in paper are not money. That's currency. And banks are allowed to go and give loans. And that money for the loan didn't exist before. So if I go to the bank and they lend me $1 million, that $1 million is created out of nothing. But the interest isn't factored in. That's not in the money system. So they have to keep on lending money to create more money. And that's one of the reasons the government has borrowed so much money because the interest has gotten so big that the system is about to implode because as soon as people stop borrowing money, the gears stop, the music stops, everything falls apart. But let's talk about the Federal Reserve because I find that story really intriguing. What does the Federal Reserve have to do with the Titanic? I'm just asking. Did you know on the Titanic there were 3 people, the wealthiest people in America, who were opposed to the Federal Reserve being a private institution because they were patriotic and they wanted America to remain independent? Who were those people? Benjamin Guggenheim, who owned huge mines in America, Isidore Strauss. You like that pause? And John Jacob Astor's. I'm going to continue on with this video. And John Jacob Astor was the wealthiest man in the world. These men were all on the Titanic. And do you know who wasn't on the Titanic, who was supposed to? J.P. Morgan and a bunch of his friends who ended up at Jekyll Island, who crafted the legislation for the Federal Reserve that got passed in 1913. Quite convenient, isn't it? That the people who are opposing it just happened to drown on the Titanic. The world is just a bunch of PR. We're told that the Titanic hit an iceberg. Very convenient, isn't it? That one sinking created the trillions and trillions of dollars of debt that Americans owe. But you want to know something that's interesting about the fractional banking system? You also need income taxes. And that was passed and made an amendment to the Constitution. But was it? People have done investigations and they haven't seen the amendment for income taxes ratified. Very convenient, isn't it? So we're nothing but batteries. We work really hard. Large institutions get access to money created out of nothing first. If you do not pay, they take real assets for something that didn't exist, that wasn't even theirs. All they had was a license to print money, literally. That $5.5 trillion that was passed in the last 2 years, that created a $500 billion. Where did that money go? I walk and I see potholes everywhere. Do you know that most of the companies in the world, public traded companies, are controlled in one way or another by BlackRock and their AI system called Aladdin? $25 trillion are influenced by this system. They've gotten rid of humans. Who owns BlackRock? Vanguard. Who owns Vanguard? We don't know. See, the world is not what you and I thought it was. But guess what? I bet on Team Humanity that we're going to wake up. We're going to ask these questions. We are not going to accept the way the world was. We're going to have some great shocks when we find out how it really works. I wrote my last book and I called it The King of Main Street. People ask me, why did you call it The King of Main Street? I didn't call it The King of Wall Street or The Wolf of Wall Street. Because our society is built by men and women on Main Street who create a tangible service or product that they provide to individuals in the economy. It's not crony capitalism. You know what crony capitalism is? It's when people are given contracts and they don't really provide a service or a thing. Now, when I was studying my securities back in the early 1990s, you know what I found really disgusting and also very interesting? Is American patriots were buying war bonds and they were getting 1 to 2%. They were doing that because they believed they were supporting their boys and girls fighting for freedom in the European theater. Most people don't know that Adolf Hitler was sponsored by Ford over at the Ford company, Watson over at IBM, who actually was the only company that was in Auschwitz. And the reason why all those Holocaust survivors have tattoos is because they needed to be tracked by IBM systems, by Rockefeller, who created the pharmaceutical industry. None of these people were tried. And you know what happened with those bonds? People were given 2 to 3%. And the US government was guaranteeing to the owners of companies that were given contracts 12% profit. So the people of America were getting 2%, while the wealthy, who were not sending their boys and girls over to fight for freedom, who some of them had been participating on the other side, were getting a guaranteed 12%. I ask these questions all the time of myself, and I go down the rabbit hole, and sometimes it's very uncomfortable. And at the same time, it's liberating because there's nothing like waking up and being present. Because this body that I have, it's temporary. And I learned that the most important thing about our lives are two things. And let me share with you what it is. Our self-respect. Number one, do not sell that. Because really, what's really valuable is not money and not fame. It is your soul. Do you look at yourself and say, I tread lightly? I'm here to expand my experience and to make the world better than I found it. Now, you have that opportunity right now. You do. Ask questions. Do your own research. The first place I'm going to suggest you look is a 1952 document from the Federal Reserve that talks about how they create money out of nothing. Basically, bondage. They wanted to export that around the world, and they did through the IMF and the World Bank, where they would get countries to accept debt, which meant slavery. Well, guess what? You are more powerful than you can imagine. Now, during the revolution that set America free to become the greatest nation that ever existed because it gave each of their citizens sovereignty over themselves and a constitution which was given to them through God, through representatives, and there was law. But first of all, man gives the power to the Constitution, not government giving us our freedom. So each and every one of us has so much power, but we've abdicated it. So going forward, if there's going to be change, it starts with you. And I welcome you because I believe in humanity 1.0. I do not believe that we should become augmented. We are beautiful. The planet is beautiful. There's so much we do not know that exists, and the only thing not known is a history not studied. And I found this. We have to give our permission, our consent for us to become enslaved. So if you say no, and when good people say no, the world changes. When water boils, it only needs 3% before there's a phase change and the whole pot boils. The American Revolution had 3% who supported it. And we are the benefactors of those 3%. And I'm going to leave with this. One of my greatest heroes and most insightful people was Margaret Mead. And she left us with this. A few people can change the world. That's the way it's always been. And I hope that you will join with me and we will change the world to the way we like it, not the way we're told it should be. Have a great evening.